Welcome back. So in this tutorial, we are going to explore one topic called as object-oriented programming in Python. So you all are aware that Python is one of the most trending technology or most trending language nowadays. If you want to create a website, we can use Python. If you want to create a game development, then we can use Python. If you want to create any kind of data science project, machine learning, artificial intelligence kind of project, then to be used Python only. So Python is a kind of language that is mostly used in wide types of applications and almost in all the applications. And so it becomes very necessary for everyone to know what the Python is, how to write the basic codes in Python. So every programming language uses some types of paradigms, and such one paradigm used by Python programming language is object-oriented programming. Now there are so many uses, so many advantages and applications of object-oriented programming language. We'll try to discover this using various example in this course. So first of all, for those who come from the non-technical background, I would just request you to go through the basic Python fundamental course first, and then you can come for the object-oriented programming because the concepts basics need to be built in order to understand the object-oriented programming using Python. So first of all, what do we mean by object-oriented programming? See, in most of the cases, we try to create something which imitate the real time behavior. So for example, if I want to create a system which will store the name of a person, his height or his age, his BMI information, and every demographic information of a person, and would perform some kind of calculations based on that. Now, in order to store this information or in order to perform some kind of calculations, I don't want to write code again and again whenever the new person comes into the system. So I want to write a code and I want to reuse it multiple times, n number of times, thousands, lakhs of times, whenever required. That is basically what we can achieve using object-oriented programming. So in object-oriented programming, there are few paradigms, or there are few things that we need to know. Obviously, there are more than this keywords that we are going to learn using the object-oriented programming language. But for now, in order to understand next few concepts, it's important to understand class, object, reusability, security, and modularity. So what do we mean by class? Class is a very generic kind of thing. So for example, human being can be considered as a class. So class always consists of two things. One is called as attribute and one is called as method. So if I consider class human, then what will be the attributes or what will be the properties of a human? So eyes, ears, nose, hand, legs, stomach, all these will become the properties of a human. And what do we mean by function? So using those attributes or using those properties, what actions we do take, that's basically what we mean by function. So for example, using eyes, we can watch. Using ears, we can hear. Using nose, we can breathe. Using tongue, we can speak. So these are basically the functions of the various body parts which is already pre-programmed, and we work according to that. So that's basically what we mean by a class, which is a collection of similarly related attributes and the functions that we actually implement on those attributes. Then comes the object. Now class human will not make any sense unless and until I'm not creating any object out of it. So for example, if I say that human XYZ or human Prachi, then Prachi will have some name, obviously the age, the value of BMI, location, gender, then actually that panda comes into the existing, or that panda comes into the existence. That's basically what we mean by the object of the class. Object is nothing but the real-time entity that represents or that exhibits all the properties and the functions that we have written inside the class. So that's basically the difference in between the class and object. We can create n number of object of the class, and that's why it gives us the concept something called as a reusability. So once you create a class, you can create n number of objects or n number of unique objects of that class, and so there is no need of writing the code again and again in order to acquire the data or in order to implement some kind of functionality on that data. It also provides us something called as a data security. So the things which are very similar, we can combine them together in one particular class And we can hide those elements from the other class so that we can add the data security. So for example, in a huge multinational companies, there are the different types of access given to the employees. There are few employees who are working on a very, a very entry level. They are not given access to the much of the confidential information of a company. But as soon as you move to the managerial level or you move to the directorial level, then gradually the information access increases. एक second. When we move to the directorial positions or even more than that, we have the higher access of data. But when we are at the very entry level, we have the very lower access of the data or very limited access of the data. This is basically what we mean by the data security and modularity, because we can divide our program into multiple modules. Each module will be written some kind of code, and then we can simply combine these multiple modules together in order to build a huge project. So it allows us to perform the modularity as well. For example, if I'm building a project for some e-commerce website, then I'll create one different class for storing the value of customers, one different class for storing the products, one different class for storing the orders. So if I want to make any changes in the orders class, I will not need to make any changes in customer or product class. So that's basically what we mean by modularity. As the code is modulated, or as the code is compartmentalized, whenever you require a certain piece of code, we directly go to that particular module and we execute that module. This is basically what we mean by the modularity that can be achieved whenever we are using object-oriented programming. So let us try to implement this object-oriented programming using Python, so that we'll come to know that how it is actually implemented, or what are the basic things like how the class is created, how the object is created, and so on. So I'm opening my Jupyter notebook where I'm going to write the code for this. So let me just show you the codes. Very and very simple codes with which we are going to start. So first we'll create a class employee. We will add the name as attribute, age as attribute, and using a method, we'll try to retrieve the information of that class. So here is the code for doing that. So in this case, I have created a class called as class employee. And in this, I have created two variables. First is name. I have passed the name value as Prachi, and I have passed the value of age is equal to 30. So the variables which are generally written inside the class are called as the class variables, which are accessible only inside that class. Then we are creating this method called as info. Whenever you want to create a method in Python, you have to use def, that is define, as a keyword, write the name of the method, and then it is mandatory to write the self. Self indicates that this is a method of the same class, that is for the employee class. It is implemented on the employee attributes. That's why it's compulsory to write self over here. Whatever class you're creating, or whatever information, it is mandatory to mention self in any method of the class. If you don't mention this, then it is going to generate an error. Now, I don't want to pass any parameter to this because I have already created the values. I have already hard-coded the values. I simply want to print those values. Now, in this case, I'm using a very simple print statement, print my name is, and then instead of writing name that we usually write in most of the cases, here you have to write self.name, because name is the attribute of the class employee. And that's why it is mandatory to write self.name whenever you want to access any attribute of the class. Similarly, over here, whenever I want to fetch the value of age, I'll write self.age when I want to fetch the information, because age is also the attribute of the class. So whenever you want to fetch the attribute of the class, it is mandatory to write self. And whenever you create the method inside the class, that time also it is mandatory that one has to write self over there. Now in this case, by this code, what I have done, I have created one object called as EMP of the class employee. So when I create the object, that time it will exhibit all the properties of this class. That means my object EMP will exhibit the property that it will access, or it can access the name Prachi, and it can access the age 30, as well as it can access this method that is nothing but info. So I'm simply writing EMP is equal to employee. So EMP is the object and employee is a class. you can create n number of objects from the class. And here I'm simply writing print emp name and emp age. So if you want to access a certain attribute, say name and age are the attributes, there are two ways. Either you can access writing like this, I mean the name of the object dot the attribute name. By this way, you can access the elements. So for example, emp.name can access this name is equal to Prachi and display the name is equal to Prachi. And emp.age can access this value 30 and can display on the screen. And if you are accessing this function itself is calling the name and age again. So you'll find out the function can also access the name of age and name. So in this case, when you simply wrote emp.name, that time it simply fetched the name. When I wrote emp.age, it simply fetched the value of age. When I'm writing emp.info, that time it is calling this function called as info, and all the information or all the statements which are written inside that info part will be executed and the output will be printed on screen. So I just hope you understood the basics of the class and object in the today's session. In the next session, we'll try to uncover more facts about the classes and objects using Python. Thanks for patiently listening to this session. See you soon in the next video. Bye-bye.